Thanks so much, Nick, for the introduction, and such a phenomenal day. I'm thrilled to be here. Education in marketing is one of my favorite topics. So as Nick mentioned, my name is LARA VANDENBERG. I'm the CEO and founder of Publicist. Publicist is an online platform that helps brands and agencies source, hire, and pay external marketing, communications, and creative teams. And so we actually launched in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. But before I was a founder, I was a marketer. And so it's in my DNA. As I mentioned, one of my favorite things about the industry is both education and then this concept of a knowledge sharing economy. And so I talk a lot about knowledge sharing. And I think that throughout the pandemic, we've potentially lost a lot of the collaboration with teams through being remote, through figuring out this hybrid work situation. And, collaboration needs to be very intentional. It's a really chaotic time to be a marketer right now. And so today, with an esteemed panel, we are going to talk about how you can advocate for yourself, how you can really show up when sometimes it's frankly really hard to do so, how you ensure you have the right mentorship and not just senior mentors, but people that you're mentoring and communities around you. And lastly, how to determine if you're in a really positive and safe and happy work environment. So I'd love to introduce ANISHA, Eric, and MAYUR to the panel. Hi, everyone. In 60 seconds, I would love everyone to introduce yourself. And let's start with, what is your mission as a marketer? So maybe, ANISHA, we can start off with you.
Yeah, sure. Well, so I joined marketing because I'm so passionate about consumer psychology and translating that into brand plans and building equity and all those sort of things. And so I've been in marketing my entire career, mostly in CPG brand management, but with stints in advertising and then a few DTC, e-commerce, digital first kind of companies. And currently I'm at Walgreens. I probably know Walgreens for being a retailer here in the US, or Boots if you've been to the UK for being a retailer out there. But what people don't know is that Walgreens Boots actually has an internal CPG company of about 10 beauty brands that span CPG and DTC. So it's brands like Number 7, Soap and Glory, Boots Ingredients, Botanics, and they have distribution here in the US outside of Walgreens as well. So Walmart, Target, Ulta Beauty. And so my mission right now is to grow, or in some cases launch, these brands in North America. We're just getting started in North America and painting white walls. So it's a lot of fun. And then the second part of my mission right now is helping lead a digital transformation at Walgreens Boots Alliance, and specifically in my division, which we've been calling Global Brands Group, and we rebranded as the Number 7 Beauty Company recently after our flagship brand. And so being owned by retailers, we have unique access to first-party data, which most CPGs don't. And really powering and being a data-driven company and training our marketers to enable our mass personalization at scale strategy. So that's my mission right now.
Well, thank you for joining us. Eric, over to you.
Yeah, hey everybody. I'm Eric Toda. I'm the global head of social marketing at Facebook. But prior to that, I was the one of 5 CMOs at Gap Inc., running a brand called Hill City, which is a men's athletic and training brand. I look at what I do per se, and it really is to tell stories in the most innovative and forward-thinking ways. My entire career has been focused on digital marketing, whether that be when I was at Facebook originally in 2008, whether it be when I was at Nike in 2013, Snapchat in 2015, and Airbnb. I think digital isn't necessarily a mechanism anymore. It's certainly our oxygen, as you can see, and it's woven within the fabric of marketing. And so what I look to capitalize on through that is a true mission of doing more than just marketing in the traditional sense. It's using those digital mechanisms, using the digital practices that we have to obviously promote and advertise and tell the stories of all the products that we represent, for sure. But it's also being able to do good with all that. How are we increasing diversity when when I was growing up, there was no diversity in advertising. How are we showing inclusivity when I was growing up, there wasn't any of that? And so really my mission is to use all these skills, all of this experience, and all these new tools that are coming to life that didn't exist before, to use them not just to obviously build our businesses, but to use the businesses, to use the brands to do good in the world, so that when my kids grow up, hopefully they don't have to feel alone like I did when I didn't see myself in either TV shows or in advertisements. They can see themselves on TV and say, I do belong.
Thanks, Eric. I love that. I think, the way that we have the ability to influence human behavior for good is something I'm very aligned with. And lastly, MAYUR, please introduce yourself and in 60 seconds or a little longer, what's your mission as a marketer?
Thank you so much. Yes, MAYUR GUPTA, and I don't know how do I follow that because I don't bring that incredible marketing background being an engineer. And I often call myself an accidental and coincidental marketeer and still learning from friends like Eric and ANISHA and others. But I'm the head of marketing and strategy for Gannett, the USA Today network. And in many ways, the mission is actually pretty straightforward. It is making the Gannett mission and purpose a reality. And, for us as a 100-year-old incredible legacy that our brand has, it includes driving a fundamental evolution and transformation from an advertising-led media business to a subscription-led content platform that is obsessed with user value and no longer driven by pure traffic, which is what media has been all about for decades and decades, and ultimately evolve from what's considered to be an incumbent category to becoming a growth business where growth is defined at the intersection of growing the brand, growing the user base, and growing the user value. It's no longer a choice between brand and performance or a choice between purpose and profitability or science and storytelling. And it is, I think, as a marketer, I like to prove the incrementality and the amplification of those choices, which are no longer choices. In fact, they are ands and not ors. So.
Thank you. So let's pick up there with Gannett. Ahead of the pandemic, what did culture look like within your marketing organization going into the pandemic, and how, coming out of it, are you building and fostering stronger teams as a result?
Yes, it's an interesting question because my journey at Gannett, I was part of the board back then, and I joined a year back within the, in the midst of pandemic. So which in itself was a different experience. So while I may not be able to relate too much on what Gannett was on the ground before pandemic, I can say, because I was in a different world, in a fast-paced growth company at Freshly, and what I would say is, I've seen the world change within organizations and outside from that growth at all cost mindset, which fortunately or unfortunately in many ways we all have been plagued with in the last 13 to 14 years, to, during the pandemic, realizing that we all had to go back to the basics, and those basics meant to really have empathy, to be inclusive, to go back and start to listen to the customer, and not only the external customer to which we were selling a brand and product, but the internal customer, our employees. We all realized that you could not be customer obsessed, with the external customer until we were obsessed with the employee value and the internal customer. A mindset that as long as a business, we were driving incremental employee value, we will inevitably drive customer and shareholder value. But if you flip that around, it is impossible. So I would say it has brought serendipity, irrationality, and compassion back to businesses if we lacked it for the last 13, 14 years.
Which are all huge silver linings. Eric, can you talk to same question at Facebook?
Yeah, of course. I think it's really funny, MAYUR's perspective, because his perspective is exactly the same as mine. There was a point in time as the pandemic started, him and I were both looking for jobs. I'm sure you remember that, MAYUR, all those conversations that we had. But I look at the market holistically, and I think we got to a point right before the pandemic where internal cultures were flourishing. you were very used to a certain way of life. You came in the office, you see your teams, you have lunch with the same people, you go to your same restaurant, and that was all shattered, within weeks. And so I look at when I joined Facebook or when I rejoined Facebook, I was in the middle of the pandemic. And so my onboarding, fully virtual, the way I interacted with my team and introduced myself to prove that I was a human and not just, some virtual reality thing, like it was all virtual, right? And what I think and what MAYUR brought us to is the need for empathy. It's the need to boil that down and say it's about human connection. And all of you watching this probably know this, that when you have meetings right now, they're all scheduled. And therefore, the interactions that you have with your team are likely very transactional. Cool, here's a check-in there. And there's no bump in the hallway conversations. There's no walking to lunch conversations, none of that. So I do think this was a massive reset in, okay, if we can't do any of those things, how do we still build relationships and how do we still build culture to the point where it could resemble or at least feel like what we were used to before? And what it takes is meaningful conversations. What it takes is understanding that, yes, then an outcome is certainly transactional. What's the update today? How are we doing here? But starting that conversation with how are you? How are you doing? How are you feeling? I could tell you right now, when I started to do that, everybody took a pause and they're like, wait, you actually just want to chat? Like, I thought we scheduled time. And I think that's the biggest unlock here, is to understand that many people think that when you schedule time or, you text someone, you just want something out of it. And I think that's how it was always treated before. We're rethinking that now by saying, no, I could text you and just say, how are you? And just leave it at that. And I think that can open up a meaningful dialogue. That could open up a connection point and let you know that the person on the other side actually cares. And so I do look at building stronger teams in today's environment is all about being meaningful and intentional with every single bit of communication and making time for something that isn't a transaction. And I think that's a really big key there, is not seeing every single interaction like you're going to pull something from it, but instead you're investing your time, you're investing, your questions. And I do think that the more that we do that holistically, not just at Facebook, the more that we do it holistically, the more that this future of a hybrid workplace will be successful.
They're great points, Eric. And just as a follow-up, I know that a lot of people that are on the line that are watching this today are young in their career and, they've never actually been in an office and experienced the water cooler chat or going for a walk with someone. So what specific advice do you have for them in potentially, collaborating with cross departments or finding that mentorship from different places?
I always tell younger folks this when I mentor them, is what's going to set them apart from someone that just knows how to get from point A to point B is for you to break out of that path and engage with other people. Yes, you have a task to do, right? For sure. I'm going to write this email. I'm going to write this brief, and then I'm going to send it off, and that's it. But I think one of the biggest keys here, and this is remote or non-remote, what will set you apart from your peers is being able to reach out to your leadership. Hey, I saw you in this all hands. You said a lot of great things, MAYUR. I just wanted to offer up if I could ever be helpful to you in the future, or if I think your one point about the way we write briefs could be stronger, and this is how. The way you engage like that, one, will allow you to, I guess, force the hand of a cooler talk conversation or a walking to lunch conversation. But what it will show is massive initiative. And I do think right now, a lot of people are kind of standoffish on that massive initiative because we don't really know how to do that. It's not like you bump into MAYUR, the CMO, or ANISHA, the CMO, in the hallway. And so you have to manufacture that route, that conversation. And you have Slack, you have Teams, you have email. It doesn't take much to reach out after you see a MAYUR or an ANISHA, after they presented in an all hands, after they just address the team and say, loved what you said, here's what I love about it, here's what I think we could do better, or here's what I can build off that. Because I'm sure, and again, I don't want to speak for you, MAYUR or ANISHA, I personally love it when people do that, because that shows me, one, they're engaged, but two, they want to help build it. And I think that's a massive culture builder right there. When you have more people reaching out and saying, how do I help build this? I'm not afraid that you're my CMO. I'm not afraid that you're my EVP, but instead I see you as someone that I could build with. Huge unlock.
Awesome. Anisha, over to you now. So let's move to mentorship. So I'd love to hear about your both mentor and mentee relationships. I actually hate the word mentee. I think that you learn so much from peers and people that are more junior than you. But for those that potentially don't have mentors that are listening, what are some great avenues to go about it? And then I'd love to hear about your mentors as well.
Yeah, sure. I mean, mentorship, I think, comes from everywhere. So I have some of those formal mentors. When I was in business school, there was a huge alumni database of women in business, and I picked one, and I still consider that person a mentor today. We just really clicked on a two-way basis, and I've learned from her. She's learned from me. To your point, it's two-way. But some of my best friends from business school are mentors as well, and they're my best friends. It's informal, but we talk about salary negotiation or as I was in my first career experience of navigating politics and figuring out how to do that, I turned to them. Right now in the pandemic, I think it has really opened up mentorship in a new way, because I can't tell you how many times I've seen these LinkedIn posts as someone who said, I've been looking for a job for 9 months, and just that there's this outpouring of support and offers for mentorship and pay it forward spreadsheets that you can sign up for that just didn't exist before. And sometimes mentorship doesn't even involve interaction. So I don't think MAYUR even knows this, but a few years ago, before I was a CMO, I heard MAYUR speak on a panel and was really inspired by a lot of things he said. And one of them was about his practice of Buddhism and how that helped him kind of manage stress, and especially tough even work situations that were tough. And I was going through a tough work situation at that time. And to me, that's mentorship too. I took a lot out of that, and I've sort of followed MAYUR's posts and things since then. And so I really believe mentorship can come from anywhere. My advice would be, number one, ask, make the request, whether that's a cold call on LinkedIn. Some people won't reply, but some people will. And so don't be afraid to just send that cold call, or connecting through, prior bosses, friends. That's a great route as well. And you'll see where you click with someone and where you don't, and where you want to create a long-term relationship and where it might just be one phone call. So just don't be afraid to ask. And I think the other piece of advice is make it easy for the other person, especially if you have an ask. Those who kind of really know what they're after, work around the schedule of the person that they're asking, can maybe make headway a little bit faster. And I have learned a lot from my mentees, or whatever term you want to use for it as well. So I'm part of the Adweek Executive Mentorship Group. I led a pod this summer of 6 junior marketers, and we formed a real connection, and they formed a connection with each other, and we just had a lot of great dialogue. And so I'm always kind of seeking that sort of mentorship on both ends of the spectrum.
Oh, that's great. And I love that you had a pod this summer, and that's so beautiful that MAYUR was a indirect mentor of yours. Anisha, just expanding on a point that you made in terms of just ask, what I will say is make the ask really specific. And while it doesn't need to be long, provide color. And I did see you speak about how you're investing in yourself through Buddhism, and this stuck with me, and I'd love to have a call rather than, can I have 30 minutes of your time, because we're probably respond to it. So,
and it helps you get better advice back. I was just saying, it helps you get better advice back. If the person knows what you're after and what your context is, you're just going to get better quality advice back.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move to actually investing in yourself and tips and tricks that we can all be using. MAYUR, I'd love to, if you can expand on what Anisha was talking about and what's had a real impact over the course of your career, and then maybe over the past year as well.
Yeah, well, first I want to thank Anisha for just being an incredible leader for whatever you just shared in the last 4 minutes. I think it's spot on. I think everyone's a mentor, and as long as you have that learn it all mindset and not know it all, I think we're all learning. So, but in terms of some of those pivotal points and building your own self. To be honest, I struggled a lot through my first many years. I was a loose cannon. I had no idea where I was headed. As you don't have to waste your time, but at a high level, did my master's in computer science, was an engineer and became an architect, then built products, became a product manager, and one thing led to the other. So I don't think I'm a blueprint for anything. But I will say that what the pivotal point for me really was the day I decided to have a point of view and perspective in life, both personal and professional. And that's why I can break my career apart in two broad phases. Phase one, when I was a hard worker, I think I come from part of the world where you're trained like that because you have to come first. If you come second, you really have a very little shot at getting anywhere. So you're trained in a certain way in that part of the world. So I was working hard, but I had no clue. I had no perspective. I had no belief system. But the pivot for me was realizing that I had to have one, not just to be a good marketer or a good engineer, just to be a good human. And I think that's really shaped the second half of my career. And regardless of any titles or roles, I think it has really given me a lot of confidence to be authentic, to even find out who I truly am and feel confidence in it, to not. And the way it's translated, I'll give you a very simple example. The first blog I ever wrote in my life was in 2018. It took me 3.5 to 4 weeks to even figure out what should I write about because I didn't believe I knew anything. And it took me a lot of time to have the confidence to go out there and start posting and have the confidence that as long as I'm being honest and I have a point of view, it will never be right or wrong. So that was a cliffhanger for me that I finally jumped over, and I'm very grateful that I did. And then since then, the focus has been just continuously believing in what you know, as well as believing in what you don't know, and being vulnerable and being confident in that vulnerability, and knowing that everything that we go through every single day and all the failures and the mistakes that we made, those are just as, and in most cases, even more relevant to everybody else than the successes that we've had, because we learn a lot more than those failures and the successes.
Thank you for sharing. Eric, same question for you. What's one way in the past, let's say 12 months, that you've really invested in yourself that's had a huge impact?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I was listening to MAYUR, a lot of it is about vulnerability and self-awareness. And I think the most successful marketers, entrepreneurs like yourself, LARA, it's about understanding what you're good at and what you're not good at. And I think that is one of the biggest things and biggest traits of how to invest in yourself. Because if you don't know any of that stuff, you likely invest in the wrong things. You'd likely invest in things that you think you need. But the more self-aware you are, the more vulnerable you are, the more that you're comfortable with saying, I don't know, or even risking being the not smartest person in the room, you'll understand what you do need to learn and what you do need to invest in yourself. And so I think it took me a long time to figure this out. It took me, I would say, 12 years, the first 12 years of my career, because of what MAYUR mentioned. Where I come from is very similar, and you have to be first, and you have to, at all costs, you got to work hard, you keep your head down, and you do anything possible to achieve the outcome. I think after I did that for 12 years, I took a step back and said, but there are so many things I don't know. There are so many things that, I'm blind to, because one, I either don't have the perspective, or two, I just don't know how to say I don't know. And so I would say probably for the past 2 years or the past 3 years in my career, I have been saying I don't know a lot more, but seeking out more perspective from people from different walks of life from me. And that's why I think, to Anisha's point, the role of mentorship is so important. But I think the role of mentorship coming from younger, potentially more junior folks, is it actually could be more fruitful than those coming from those who have seen it all and done it all. And the reason is because that perspective of what they're seeing on the ground, what they're seeing in the field, is likely going to help you inform your own perspective based on everything else you know. And so I think seeking mentorship back from the top and bottom, and being able to say, tell me more about that, because I have no idea what you're talking about, is a perfect way to invest in yourself because you know exactly what you're building towards.
I completely agree. I think the term we need to coin is reverse mentorship. I prefer that. Anisha, over to you. Can you recall a situation in the workplace where you've dealt with typecasting, whether being a female or other? Can you reference something that and the way that you advocated for yourself?
Yeah, many, many times. As a female, it's interesting. Mayur was talking about having a strong point of view. I'm someone who has always had a strong point of view, and so at the very junior levels, I was expressing that point of view even in front of senior people, and I got told to tone it down. And ironically, that quality in me is what drives my success now. And so, advocating for myself, I didn't tone it down. I continued to just be my authentic self and state my opinions where I had them, and listen to other people's opinions as well. But I always, as I progressed in my career, looked for cultures that would mold me in the ways that I wanted to be molded into, but avoided cultures that were trying to mold me into something I didn't want to be. And, I think that, again, we've progressed as an industry and as corporate America in the sense where there's just, especially today between Black Lives Matter and the pandemic and everything that's happened over the last year and a half, there is more openness to allowing people to be their authentic selves. And, with all the DEI efforts, there's a lot of training now for senior leaders on how to let people be themselves. And that didn't exist, 10, 12 years ago when I was starting out. And so that typecasting as a woman of color, fortunately, I just sort of stayed true to myself and had a strong personality and sought cultures where I felt the fit. And then an example of typecasting that was a little bit more of a positive story is a few years ago, I moved to Silicon Valley. And up until that point, I had some experience in DTC and e-commerce, but largely a resume that screamed CPG. And I went to Silicon Valley thinking, I know digital marketing, and I was going after a unicorn DTC company that I thought was my dream job. And I got through 14 rounds of interviews, got to the final rounds that took, I think, about 2 or 3 months, and lost the job in that final round to someone else. And ultimately, the feedback I got, it was very clear I had been typecast as a big company CPG girl who didn't know smaller startup-y type of companies and didn't really know digital marketing. And after I reflected on that, I realized actually, while I know digital marketing concepts, the language in Silicon Valley is different. And I had to learn that language. And so while we, maybe we're talking about the same concepts, I didn't use the same words, things like CAC to LTV ratio, and so through talking to people, even Googling words sometimes in terminology, I started educating myself. And I actually took a job that was a stepping stone for me where it was a DTC unicorn company, but in the beauty space. And I had a lot of experience in beauty. And so, my advice, if you're trying to break out of a typecast or mold that people have put on you, is sometimes maybe you just take a stepping stone to that ultimate place that you want to be through changing 1 or 2 aspects of your background, but maybe not changing every aspect. There's something that was familiar to me about being in the beauty space, but still exciting to me about being at, a billion-dollar, very fast-growing DTC company. I had never been in that kind of hypergrowth. And so I had this experience that was allowing me to break out of my mold a little bit. It was very different from CPG, but still have some comfort to continue learning on the things that I didn't know.
Amazing. Now, unfortunately, we're at time, but Anisha, MAYUR, Eric, thank you so much for your time today. It was such a great chat, and thanks to the ANAs for hosting us.
Thank you.